Hello, this is Mike Gambrill at BlackHawk Paramotors. This is Jeremy and Daniella. They're our new dealers for Illinois, and they're here every month for a week at a time doing training. And so they're back, and so we figured we'd go ahead and cover carburetors today. So I'm going to be letting them do most of the work and just kind of walking them through what we look for. I'll start off with, this is the Walbro WG8 carburetor. You'll find this on the 90s and the 125s. And this is a WB37 carburetor. And you'll find these on our 190 and on the Air Max. So two different carburetors. They work the same. The big difference between them is on the WG8, you have one mixture screw. And on the WB37, we have a high-end mixture screw and a low-end mixture screw. So other than that, internally they work the same. So we'll start off with the WG8 carburetor. First thing that you want to do when you get your motor, or if you take it apart or you're overhauling the carburetor or anything, is the basic setting for this carburetor. You'll want to go ahead and turn it in all the way until the mixture screw stops. Don't force it. It's a very, very fine needle at the end of it, and you don't want to put grooves in it because that definitely will affect everything. So we just turn it till it naturally stops, and then you'll go ahead and count 2 1/4 rotations all the way out, and that's counterclockwise. So there's 2 full turns plus 1/4. On the WG8 carburetors, on the 90cc motors and the 125 motors, that is your first setting. That's where you're going to start all of it from. It's going to be a little bit on the rich side. We want you to start on the rich side versus the lean side, so you're not running it hot. Easier to go from rich and then lean it in little steps. On the WB37 carburetor, your initial setting, you can go ahead and turn the high-end screw. Turn that in all the way until it stops naturally. And on the 190 and the Air Max, it's the same. You'll come out 1 plus 1/4 turn. That's it, 1 1/4. On your low-end screw, you can go ahead and turn that all the way in until it naturally stops. Might have to get that out of the way. Go ahead and turn this in all the way until it stops, and then go ahead and you open it 1 1/8 turn. And that's your starting point for both the 190 and the Air Max. Like I said, these settings are rich. We want them to be rich. So those are the first things I wanted to cover with you guys. That right there is the basic setting. Idle speed is a little bit different on both of these carburetors. On the WG8, it uses a cone. So on this cone, if we move the cone out, then your idle speed goes down. It actually is just moving the throttle plate. Both of these are mechanical adjustments. They have nothing to do with mixture. So all you're doing is basically increasing the throttle a little bit or decreasing the throttle a little bit to achieve the proper idle speed. On all of our 2-stroke motors, we like to target between 1800 and 2000 RPM. You can even be as high as 2200 RPM. Somewhere in there. We don't want them trying to idle down at 1000 RPM or anything like that. All they do is just load up. So this one is simple. If you turn it clockwise, you're increasing the RPM. If you turn it counterclockwise, you're decreasing the RPM. Okay, so on the WB37 carburetor, this is your throttle arm, and it has a screw that goes through to the other side. You see this flat part, right? Mm-hmm. That screw is just going up against that. So if we turn this screw once more clockwise, then we're increasing the RPM. If we turn it counterclockwise, we're decreasing the RPM. Okay? And these are mechanical adjustments. They have nothing to do with mixture. Okay? So those are the basics. You know, you always want to start off with these settings. The idle speed, you won't know that until after you fire up the engine and that's another thing I want to bring up. Whenever you do the initial adjustments on your carburetor and then you warm up the engine first, do not try to make mixture adjustments or idle speed adjustments on an engine that is cold. You're going to get false information. So always warm the engine up to at least 180 or 200 degrees Fahrenheit if you have a CHT on yours. If you don't, let the engine run and bring the RPM up a few times, except for a couple of minutes at least to get the engine warmed up. Then you'll get what the true idle speed is going to be, and then you can start making mixture adjustments. But never try to make mixture adjustments or idle speed adjustments when the engine is cold. Okay? So those are the basics right there. Both of these carburetors, it's exactly the same on your fuel metering side. The fuel metering side of the carburetor is real simple. It's the silver plate, and it's the same on both carburetors. This is your fuel pump side, and this is where the vacuum line hooks up to the crankcase of your motor. So both of these are basically the same, except they operate the same. The fuel pumps are doing the same thing. It's just this is a little bit bigger. That's really the only difference. So that's that side of the house. So while we're on the fuel metering side, we can go ahead and take those screws out. I'll let you guys do this. So just remove all 4 screws.
There's a little washer. So was that?
The washers actually are on there
Are
for
they?
good. Yeah,
Okay.
they don't come off. I also like to point out we have a group of students here with us also. So they're kind of hanging out and watching things, and this is what we cover with all of our students when they come through here, is how to do the basic things with their paramotor so they can take care of it. Now just go ahead and remove the plate, and so you can set that off to the side. This right here is your fuel metering diaphragm. Okay. The reason for this hole right here is because on one side of the diaphragm it needs to pick up what the ambient air pressure is on the outside. There's a gasket underneath the diaphragm here, so if we remove the diaphragm we can set it off to the side. So this seals this area up, and as you accelerate an engine, air and fuel is being mixed going through a venturi in the center of the carburetor. So as we increase the air going through the venturi, through the center of the venturi we have a decrease in pressure but an increase in speed, right? So the air is flowing faster through there, but we end up with a lower pressure. So this side of the carburetor is actually sensing the low pressure here, and as we increase the throttle and the pressure in the venturi decreases, this diaphragm is actually pulled down, and as that diaphragm's being pulled down, this right here is your fuel metering arm. This has, on the diaphragm, you see a little nub here. So that's in contact right here. So as we increase the throttle, the air pressure inside the venturi is decreasing, meaning we need more fuel. So it actually pushes down and down and down because the diaphragm's pulling it down, which is opening up the metering needle, allowing more and more fuel to come through. Okay? So that's how that works. If we let off the throttle, then there's a pressure increase. So it just needs the hole here to let the diaphragm come back. So it actually closes this. So anytime that we have an obstruction in this or anything like that, it'll definitely affect here. And you'll find that the engine's running rich. Okay? So that's how this side of it works. You can go ahead and remove that screw, and we can even peel the gasket off if you want, like that. So remove that. Now, I like to put my finger over there because there's a spring under there, and it's a little spring.
And it'll go fine.
Yeah, and then usually you have a very hard time finding it. You'll notice that we've laid out, this is just kind of one of our old shop towels, but we laid that out because then you can see all the parts, and especially little springs and screws. It's just easier to keep track of things.
Okay.
Now you can go ahead and just slowly let that up and then let the parts come out.
Oh boy.
And that's that little spring I'm talking about. So anyways, this right here is the spring that applies pressure to the metering arm, which keeps this sealed into the seat, not allowing fuel to come through. And then, as like I was explaining before, as we increase speed, the low pressure pulls the diaphragm down onto this part of the lever, which raises
That guy.
this guy up, allowing more and more fuel to flow through there. Does that all make sense? It's real simple, real simple system. Okay. For your general maintenance of this, it really, a lot of this depends on how much you fly and how much you let it sit. And letting them sit generally makes these go bad faster. Because once they've had fuel on them and then you let them sit for 2 or 3 months, they start becoming stiff. But if they're used all the time and fuel going, you'll get a year or more out of them. But the evil part of them is letting them sit and long periods of time, and then this is a really fine rubber, as you can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very thin. So, and especially with the ethanol and the fuel these days, ethanol sitting on something for long periods of time without moving through, along with the mix of oil, these just become hardened. And if these become hardened, then they're not so sensitive anymore for giving you an accurate fuel metering.
You see them rip or tear?
Not really.
No?
Not really. Most of the time, it's just you pull them out and they can be literally as hard as a piece of cardboard. I've seen that.
If you're not going to be flying for a while, would just starting up every once in a while to get the fuel through there
Yep.
solve that problem?
Yep, exactly. Exactly. If you're going to let it sit for 2 or 3 months, and this is what I tell a lot of people, because like where I've been flying at a lot in the Philippines, we get about 3.5 months a year that we can fly, and the rest of the time we don't get to fly due to weather. So at the end of the season, I'll go ahead and just take the carburetor apart, give it a really nice cleaning, flush out the fuel tank, put new fuel lines on it, a primer bulb, put a new kit in the carburetor, put it together, it's ready for next season. Because I know if I let this sit for 7 months, it's going to bite me when I go out to the field and try to fire it up. That's just one way to look at it. So let's go ahead and remove the fuel mixture screw. I was saying before, there's a washer behind the spring, and then there's a little O-ring that seals it.
It's not going to pop out at me.
Nope, it won't pop out at you, but the O-ring sometimes stays stuck in there. And if we're going to clean out the carburetor with carburetor cleaner, we don't want to get the carburetor cleaner on the O-ring because oftentimes they swell up.
There it
So
is.
that all came out together, which is good. Go ahead and separate all those out and just lay them here. We can have a look at how all that goes together. Good. Now, the carburetor kits don't come with a new O-ring, and honestly, I've never found any reason to ever have to replace them. But you can go to most hardware stores that have those O-ring kits and stuff, and you can match that up in case you tear it or something like that. That washer is important to go on there because if the spring is pushing against the O-ring directly, it's just going to tear up the O-ring. So that washer's always got to be there. And I was bringing up the point earlier of not screwing this in and then cranking on it. And that's why. Because what you'll end up doing is putting a groove, and this little needle end here is got a taper on it. So if you put a groove in it, it's going to affect the fuel metering process. It'll end up being rich and stuff. So anyways, we don't want to do that. Okay, so on the other side of the carburetor, this is the fuel pump side. So your fuel line is connected here. This line right here goes to the crankcase of the engine. On a 2-stroke engine, you have vacuum and you have pressure. So it's a pulse. So as that piston goes up and down, you'll have a negative pressure and a positive pressure in the crankcase itself. So what's happening here is this is getting literally sucking a diaphragm this way, and then on the pulse part, it's pushing the diaphragm back the other way. Now you have a fuel pump. So on the other side of the diaphragm in here, all it's doing is just flapping back and forth. Negative, positive, negative, positive. And that's what draws the fuel up from your fuel tank and into the carburetor. And it goes from this side through that side. And then it gets distributed inside to your idle circuit and your main jet circuit. So it's remove those 4 screws. There we go.
There's the screen.
There's the screen.
You pull that off. Now I'm going to make a note. This is the diaphragm, and this one is made out of a, it's kind of a fabric material. You could almost call it fiberglass in a way. These diaphragms are designed to put up with the ethanol and the fuel. Okay. All of our carburetor kits that we send out now come with this diaphragm. Some of the kits that you might find will come with this diaphragm and one that looks like this made out of the same material. If you get one like that, use this diaphragm. That way you don't suffer the consequences of the ethanol all the time on the fuel pump side. That's what that is made for.
And there's a certain way that goes on and off, right? Like, so you really want to look to see.
Yeah, on these you'll find that it has an alignment dowel.
Okay.
There you go.
So when you look at how the gasket is placed on here, there's 2 pins. So when you go to put this back together, well, it won't go together that way. It won't go together that way. But if we line the pins up, they really only go on one way. Okay. And on this side of the carburetor, it's the same. You've got an alignment pin here, so the gasket, and you have one here. So literally, these can only go on one way. I'll point out something really quick. On your fuel metering side, the gasket goes first, then the diaphragm on top, and then the plate. Okay? Some people get this mixed up. If you have this down below, believe it or not, just the thickness of that gasket completely messes up your fuel metering. It'll be, you won't get the engine started. It'll just flood it out because it's actually lower than what it should be, so it doesn't take much pressure on that spring. So when you put it together that way, you'll pull on the rope and you'll just smell gas.
Is that the screen that we talked about earlier that
Yep,
collects?
we're getting into that. So on the fuel pump side, we can kind of follow through. The fuel's coming in through here. It comes into this little passage, okay? This diaphragm is sitting on top like that, and this is getting pushed up and down, up and down, up and down. So as the fuel's drawn in, now it gets pushed along this passage, and there's a screen right here. That screen is very, very, very fine, and we can pop that out. I don't want to use that. Use this maybe. Your carburetor kits come with this screen. A lot of times I just go ahead and clean it, but that's the screen, and probably hard to tell in the video and even looking at your eyes. This screen is really, really fine.
As I say, it doesn't even look like a screen.
Yeah. So what happens is you can get some stuff. Fuel filters, as much as we want them to block everything, don't. So you will get some very, very fine stuff that comes through. And nowadays with ethanol and this type of fuel line and rubber fuel line and stuff, the ethanol actually deteriorates the inside of the fuel line, and it's very microscopic little particles, and it will show up on this screen and it'll look like a white chalk, and sometimes it even looks like strings, little white strings. And it will start clogging that screen. And you as a pilot running your motor, and if you have a cylinder head temperature gauge on there, you'll start noticing higher temperatures. And if you're looking at your spark plug frequently, like you should be to make sure that it's tuned right, you'll start noticing instead of a nice chocolate brown on the porcelain of the spark plug, you'll start noticing it getting lighter and lighter and lighter. That's a very good indication that this screen is getting blocked. So also a loss of power or not being able to achieve full power stuff is a good indication that this screen might be blocked. If you're experiencing any of that, stop. Don't keep running your motor and everything. Take it apart and check this screen. You'd be surprised. A lot of times it's getting blocked up. We're now, I don't have one with me, but we're starting on all of our motors to go with a 40 micron filter. And that should help eliminate hopefully a lot of this, especially with the fuel line deterioration stuff.
What's the best way to clean that screen?
Best way to clean this screen, we're getting into it. If you go ahead and pull this side off, we have the fuel metering needle is out. This is the fuel passage. So we have fuel coming through the screen this way and coming out that way. So if we have the screen still in here, easiest way is to take your can of carburetor cleaner, and it's always nice to have this with the little red hose on it. Your screen would be in there. You can go right through here and then shoot it back through. I like to put my finger a little bit over there because sometimes that screen might come launching out with it. So if you just put your finger over there and just give it a couple of shots like that and then blow through it. And then you can actually hold it up to the light like this and like that, and you'll see through the screen. And you'll be able to tell whether it's clean or not clean. But that's the easiest way to do it. Okay? And without changing it. Like I said, if you have the carburetor apart anyways and you get the carburetor kit, it comes with a new screen. So you can actually just take that one out, put a new one in. Normally I just clean it. So anyways, that's that part of it. So once we have it this far apart, and we're going to go ahead and clean everything, what we want to do is go through and clean all the passages. I like to start right here with the mixture. So we can put that hose all the way through here, and it's good to do as I say, not as I do. Wear safety glasses. If you look inside the carburetor,
We're ducking.
there's a brass looking thing coming up. That's your main fuel. And then if you look right here, you can see 3 itty bitty holes here. That's your idle. So that circuit's always open. So if we shoot through here, we should actually see carburetor cleaner come out all of these ports. And we know it's clean. If you don't see it coming out the ports, then it's actually got some stuff in it. It's kind of rare to see that because that screen blocks everything. But we would start here, and then we can go through, and you can see that carburetor cleaner dripping out from the carburetor. Kind of hard to show without messing things up, but I can actually see the carburetor cleaner coming through all of these. So if we push it up against there, see that? Can you see the spray coming through?
Yep.
And it's coming through all of them.
Yep.
So that's what I like to do. Now we know that all the passages are clear. That's the easiest one to do. The rest of it is you can just simply spray everything out. You can go through, this right here is your middle side, and if you watch through here you would see it shooting out through the main. This is your main jet. So shoot through there, but easily it's, if you just go right through here, it goes through all of them. Okay, that's the easiest thing. On this side, these ports are very big because all it is fuel transfer. It's a fuel pump, so we're moving fuel from here, we're putting it through here, through the filter, and out the other side to the metering side. Okay, so there's nothing really on this side that you have to really poke through. You can simply just go through and do that. Make sure they're all clear. So we go through each one of those. Once you've done that, it's nice to sit there with an air compressor. If you don't have an air compressor, you can actually buy cans of air. Blow it dry so everything's nice and dry. And then we can go ahead and get our carburetor kit. Now, this gasket lifted off very nicely. If you look at the fuel pump side, this plate, you'll see that it has raised grooves going all the way around, and that's what actually bites into the gasket and seals on this side. So remember earlier I was talking about the gasket goes on first. On this side, the gasket goes on last. Okay, so you'd actually have your fuel pump diaphragm go on first, then the gasket and the plate. Does that make sense?
Yep, sure does.
And on this, it's easy to line it up because you have this rounded part here, lines up here. So if you're going back together, it's just simple. You can go right there, and those dowels lock everything in place. So the alignment and having the gasket in the right place and stuff is always pretty easy. So I'm going to grab a carburetor kit real quick. So we got our carburetor kit. It has all kinds of goodies in here. So we can just cut that open. Get everything laid out. Like I said, some kits will come. There's that screen. Some kits will come with the rubber diaphragm.
Okay.
So if it does come with that, you can just set that off to the side. Go ahead and hold on to it, because if you need to replace a diaphragm or something, it's a good standby. You can just go ahead and use it.
Can we show what type of kit?
This kit is a K12-WG from Walbro. So we can set that off to the side. Here's our fuel pump diaphragm. Here's our metering side gasket. Here's our metering diaphragm, so we can just separate this stuff out. And then here's our fuel pump side gasket. Your kit will come with a new metering arm, along with the rod that goes through there. It'll come with a new metering pen, and then it comes with the new screen. The one thing this kit doesn't come with, and I'll keep pointing this out, is that little spring. Don't lose it, because it's hard to get a hold of them. So
These can be set aside.
yep, so we can take all these things and we can put them off to the side so they're out of our way. Now it also comes with a couple other things. These right here are little freeze plugs, and that right there is a lock, and that is for your throttle arm. So if we were to remove this off, what holds that throttle arm in is that. On the end, on the fuel metering side, we have a plug here, and then we have a plug here. That's what these are for, and I've never really had a reason to pull these out unless when I blew through here to make sure that the passages are clear. If they're not clear, now you can go ahead and you'll have to use a very small drill and lightly make a hole in it, put the end of a like an awl or something in there, and pry that thing out. And then that exposes all the passages. Okay? So, and then you can also use a screwdriver and remove the main jet. That opens everything up so you can get in there and actually do a more thorough cleaning. The only time you ever really run into that is if you have a carburetor that's sat for a year and the fuel is turned to varnish. And so when the fuel turns to varnish, it blocks those little passages. So then you can actually just open it up and then really get after it. But Carrie brought up a point here a minute ago about asking about using a fine piece of wire to poke through things and stuff. Don't do it. You can just end up messing up a port that way. So anyways, these can be removed stuff, but we're not going to worry about that one today. If you do have to remove this, when you put the new ones in, it basically, you just set it in there. It'll kind of drop in, and then you would take the end of a like a punch. You go right in the center and you whack it, and then that spreads it out. Because it's a dome, if you push the dome in, then it comes out like that. So far, does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
It's helping out. Okay. So now that we've went through everything, cleaned everything, now we can go back together with it. So you guys remember how it came apart?
Yeah.
Okay.
One quick question is why it's off. Is it good to take like a brush to get some of the black residue of?
Yeah, if you have gasket material left on here and stuff, you can go ahead. It's really nice to use if you have a plastic scraper rather than a knife or anything like that, or even a wire brush. But the problem with the wire brush syndrome is when you start scrubbing it that way, it makes little pieces that get back into everywhere that you don't want to do it. So anyways, you can just scrape that off with like a plastic scraper. On this side, if you were to imagine taking, I want to get the gasket off, you can end up, these are just real fine lands going through, and you can end up just cutting right through them. So using a plastic scraper, or on this one here, using the wire brush is really good too, because you're not going to affect anything here.
Okay.
Okay. I wanted to point out one other thing too. You'll notice on the fuel pump side of the carburetor, there's 2 holes here. That's the same thing. It needs to sense outside pressure. If we had this completely sealed up and we have this pump going back and forth without letting the other side of the house have some ambient pressure, it can end up just getting locked in one position. That makes sense. Okay?
Okay.
So when I go back together, I like to start with the fuel metering side because it's the most entertaining.
Well, yeah, it seems like it's going to be quite the challenge to. I mean, I have small fingers, but somebody that has the big fingers, my goodness.
Yeah.
So,
Tweezers.
do
Yeah.
you attach this first?
Yeah, what I like to
Or-
do is just start assembling. First, since we have the carburetor setting here, we know where the spring goes, so we can set it right here.
Okay.
And then if you take this side, I like to just go ahead and, you notice that the rod will be longer on one side and then shorter on the other side where it fits into here. So if you just kind of set yourself up as close as you can that way, and see how I'm using my fingers,
Hold it in
and
place.
I can do it like this,
Yeah.
and then I can get the new metering pin minus the hair, and my fingers will actually kind of go around the spring to guide it. So I can just go right here, drop that down, and then I take my finger and push down on here. And you'll notice on the fuel metering arm, it's got a dimple in here. That dimple goes through the other side, and that's where your spring kind of locks into, and you can see through here a little bit that the spring's lined up. I just found by having my fingers like this, it just captures the spring. It's not going to go launch itself in case I mess it up. Then you can just hold that down and then get the screw that we removed. And it's nice if you have a magnetic screwdriver
Oh, sure.
because you can get...
Is that spring something that's easy to get?
Well, that's what he's saying. Don't lose it.
Don't lose it. So now you can go in and get the screw started. There you go. Good job. And then just snug it down.
Snug. Okay.
Yeah, don't crank on it. It's a little screw.
Okay.
Okay, so that's done. Now what we want to do, and you guys can order these on Amazon. I think they're like $5 or $6 each, and it's an actual Walbro W. And this is a gauge, and this is specifically for setting up your fuel metering arm height. No gasket. And if you look on here, you'll notice it has all the different series of carburetors that Walbro makes on it. So what we want is the WG, And so we can look on this side. This is a bit worn, but right here's the WG. So this goes right across, and see how that center goes right to the metering arm? Okay. What we want is this to just touch the metering arm. So you shouldn't see a gap there. And at the same time, if I put this down, it should not be pushing down on the fuel metering arm. Okay? So this is where the setting is supposed to be. And most of the time, they're right on.
If it's not,
If it's not, example, let's say that we put this down here and it actually is pushing down on the metering arm. Well, you can take your finger and get your nail in there and hold that down, and it doesn't take much. Push on the end of it and tweak it down. It's that simple. And if you were to put your gauge up here and go, wow, there's daylight there, that means that we want to raise that up. So again, you can hold on to it here, get your fingernail under there, and just give it a couple little tweaks up until you get it. Because all that's contacting is the little nub on your fuel metering diaphragm. Okay? So we have to have that height set. So while we're talking about that, if you saw daylight here, what kind of a fuel mixture condition do you think that we would get?
It's gonna allow more fuel through.
Be rich.
Nope, it's going to be lean.
With more fuel?
Nope, it's going to be less fuel.
Less fuel.
Because now this diaphragm has to travel down that much farther before it contacts it.
Yeah.
Remember, this is a lever,
So less fuel.
so it's going to be less fuel. It's going to be lean.
the lever's going this way, right?
So we're pushing the lever down, which raises
Raises
that arm
that
up.
arm.
So if this is already down
Yeah.
a little bit before even lifting that, then this has to travel down that much farther. There's not as much throw there lifting it, right?
Sure.
So it's going to be less fuel. And on the other side of the house, if this was up, what do you think that's going to do? It's going to be rich.
Rich.
Okay, so if this metering arm is up a little bit, then it's going to contact it right away. And as you give it more throttle, it's got a bigger lever, so it's going to let more fuel in.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we set this up, we just do it right as Walbro says. And see, that's just touching, and I like that. It's not pushing down on it, and there's no daylight. Would you agree? Then check it out.
I would agree.
Pretty spot on. And most of the time they're that way. Sometimes you get one that is a little bit down, and sometimes you get one that's a little bit tweaked up. So by using the gauge to adjust it, you can't really go wrong. So once we have that's all set up, we can just check that again real quick to make sure that it's, yep, that's good. Okay, so we've checked our fuel metering arm height. So what would go on next?
The so this is which side? The one where the
It's going to be the gasket
and
goes
then
on
the
first.
diaphragm.
Remember, we have the alignment dowel here and a dowel here. So if those are lined up, like I said, they can only go on one way. So we put the gasket on, and then we can put our new diaphragm on, and the diaphragm goes on. You see the little movie reel looking thing here? That faces down.
So if you were to put it on backwards, what would
Well,
happen?
I don't know, you can put it on backwards.
Oh, it doesn't even go that way.
Well,
Oh, I guess
because
it
it doesn't
won't
line
line
up
up.
with anything.
Okay.
So we know that there's an alignment dowel here that
Oh.
would go there.
See, I'm already doing it wrong.
There we go.
There
Perfect.
We go. Oops, now I moved everything else. Okay.
Let it set on, and then the plate, it has the same alignment dowels, so then that would go on next. Good?
Yep.
Now you can go ahead and take the 4 little screws and get those all going in, and then just snug them up. Tendency for some people with screwdrivers and screws is to really reef on them and crank them up. If you do that with these, what can happen is you can actually bend the plate. And then what do you think can happen? Now you have a leak. So These are little screws. They don't require, you just want to snug them up nice and that's it.
Looks like a little lock washer or something.
Mm-hmm.
So-
That's exactly what it is.
You're just snugging them, right?
Mhm.
Yep. And notice how she's going opposing. That's good. Okay. So you satisfied with that?
I think so.
Okay. So now we can flip the carburetor around and do the fuel pump side. Screen goes first. So we want to put the new screen in.
The bevel edges facing up.
Yeah, you'll see on the screen it has edges that are folded up. So we want those up edges facing up. This is a fun one. You get a little breeze or anything and this thing's gone. So I like to get it centered. Okay, so getting that screen in there, what I found to work really good is a pencil with an eraser on it. Fits pretty good. So we get that kind of centered up on the screen and then just push down.
Perfect.
There it is. Yep. Seats it down really nice and it's uniform all the way around. It works really well. So just use a pencil eraser. So now the screen is in. And one thing that you want to do is see this little port right here. So remember on the fuel pump, we're pulling the fuel in here and it's going through here and then it goes through there. You want to make sure that that screen is below this port or else it doesn't really do any good, does it?
Nope.
Okay. If you use that pencil with the eraser trick, go down like that, you'll end up so that passage is clear and the screen is actually below it so that the fuel's actually getting filtered. Okay.
So this is opposite, right? Diaphragm goes first,
Well,
or filter.
what we can do here is
Oh,
we'll
yeah.
go, this is an alignment dowel and an alignment.
Okay.
So once more, we can just line those up. So we want the gasket to go onto this plate first and then the diaphragm. So we can look and see. Oh, stay on there, dude. So those line up. Something came off. There. Okay. So the dowels are coming through on each side. And we know that this nice little round part, like we talked about earlier, is going to go up to where the screen is at. So the trick is to hold this, flip it around, keeping those lined up on the dowel. Then you can come down here, set one edge down, the other edge down, and you can wiggle it and see it's all in place, and you can see all the screw holes are clear. So now you know everything's there. And then you can go ahead and put the other screws in. Just hold it in place.
These are also just snug.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So last but not least is our fuel mixture screw. So you remember how that goes together? We can actually put that together
Okay.
real quick. So
The
you put the
spring
spring.
was first.
Yep. Then the washer.
Then the washer and then the O-ring.
And then the O-ring. So just slide that over the threads. There you go. And then it goes right there.
to get hung up, huh?
Yeah, just take your time. Don't try to, it'll start threading itself in naturally.
Take some finesse.
Oh wait, you need to go on this.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah, there we go.
I was gonna say, I'm like, is that supposed to be the other roll?
Well, I thought that you pointed at that one. I thought it was strange.
Sorry, I
That's
was
okay.
pointing.
Well, that makes a lot more sense. All right, so how far am I going down with
Go
it?
all the way until it naturally stops.
Okay. Stop.
Okay, now go ahead and 2 plus 1/4 turn.
There's 1, 2,
And a quarter. And you're done.
Okay.
Your carburetor's ready to be installed back on the motor again. If you have already got your carburetor set for whatever elevation that you're at and stuff, just you should always know where your mixture is supposed to be set anyways. So you can just go right back to your base setting again and put it back on and away you go.
Sounds good.
Okay?
Yeah.
So that carburetor's good. Now there's this one. So I'm going to let you guys do this one on your own. And everything about doing this one is exactly the same as that one, except we got a low mixture screw and a high end mixture screw. So there you go. And this carburetor I think is new, so we won't pull out a kit for it. But
So you're taking the mixture screw out first.
yep, go ahead and just remove them.
You're taking them both out then.
Yep. Now, the high-end screw on this has the same. It's a spring with a washer and an O-ring. The low-end one is only a spring. There's no O-ring for it or anything.
Here, I'll get that out of the way. So your washer and your O-ring are still in there.
Yep.
Is there a good way to get it out besides?
With
Careful.
this, you can actually get here and just gently. We don't want to mess up our thing, but the washer should just basically fall out. You flip it around. And then the O-ring, you can just lift out. Like I said, don't jam that in there or anything, but you can just gently lift it out with that. And you can take the low end screw out.
Okay.
Okay. Is all this making sense to you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
It'll be nice if that procedure is included in a manual someday.
It will be.
Good.
Yeah. Okay, there's going to be one difference on this carburetor, so you can just lift the plate off. Notice how I pushed it forward?
Yeah.
On this fuel metering diaphragm, you'll notice that there is a slot. Okay.
Oh.
Here.
And that slot
It hooks
lines
in there.
up and hooks into your fuel metering arm. Okay. And it will, notice we have that alignment dowel, that's
Yeah.
the same on both these carburetors. So if you find it sticking a little bit, you just push towards that dowel
Yeah.
in the center and it comes out. When you put it back on, it's the same thing. You'll come back, and to make sure that it is engaged, you'll just kind of gently lift and you'll know if it's
Take it out.
there or not. Most of the time, this is brand new.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
So it's the same.
everything's the same.
Now I see a little
for the
screen
most
here.
part. Yep, that's because this has a low side circuit and a high side circuit. So that's just an additional filter
Okay.
that goes there. So this is all new. Your carburetor kit will come with all the same stuff that we pull out.
That slides right
Gaskets on there.
Yeah, this is just, we can separate that. Now go ahead and take the screwdriver, remove those two screws. Separate this. Okay, and then that plate lifts out. So usually if you get in here like that, you can just give it a gentle lift. And there's a gasket underneath there. Yep, you can set that off to the side. And all this is doing is exposing your high side and your low side passages. Okay. Now you can go ahead and it's the same thing with the fuel metering on.
Hold it down.
Yeah. Don't
Right.
let it
You don't want to lose the spring.
launch itself. Let's go ahead and let it come up. Just relieve the tension on the spring. There you go.
Oh, that's a big one.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so that side's apart. Now you can go to the fuel pump side. Want to talk us through this, Jeremy?
Okay. So, you take the cover off.
Yep.
And we got the gasket. And with this being new, let's stick a little bit.
Yep. And I'm gonna, while you're doing that, I'm gonna get another kit out because we'll just replace that fuel pump diaphragm with one of the newer style.
You want it off the gasket right away?
Yeah, you can go ahead and just take it off.
Boy, that's really sticky.
That's a really thin one too.
Yep.
And then it looks like it has that same screen we switched out on the other one.
Has the exact same screen.
Okay.
Like I said, the carburetors, they work the same, everything, we just have two different mixture adjustments rather than one.
Yep.
That's the only difference.
Oh, that sticks really good. Trying to do it so it doesn't rip.
There you go.
There we go. Okay.
All right. So these passages and everything are basically identical, except for having a low side and a high side. So what we do want to do is, you see where the screen is at on this one? That's right there. So if we wanted to clean out that screen, we'd do the same thing. You could flip it upside down. It's the same process. Either carburetor.
Stick it through.
So you can put the hose through there, and then, like I said, I like to take my finger and cover it a little bit and then spray through. That way you don't launch the spring out, or the screen.
And watch your eyes. You can see it came out.
You can blow through it too, and then that just gets it out of the screen. said, an air compressor or a can of compressed air to dry them out. You can hold that up to the light, look through. You can see
Clear
all
as
the
day.
screen. Yep. It's just a quick way to look. And then you would go ahead and you could go ahead and start shooting through passages. And what I like to do, again, is your low side and your high side right there. So I'll show you something. If you look right here, watch where the red hose goes. I can actually get it through there. There it is. Okay. So when you go to spray this out, try to get it up against here and you'll see that it kind of seats itself. Then that means that you're going to actually go through there. And then I like to put my thumb over it also. If you're watching through the carburetor, there's your main.
Yep, spin right out.
Okay. That's your high side. Okay. Now if we go through the low side, doing the same thing, we can put the hose through here. Look where it goes. See that passage? Now
Will it fit
here's
through there?
it won't fit
Okay.
through there. So here's the challenge. I'll back up a second. On your 37 carburetor, and you probably have a hard time seeing this on the video, but if you look right here, there's 3 passages or 3 holes. There's 1, 2, 3. They're in line. If you flip this around and look straight through right here, you'll see them 1, 2, and 3. Okay? So when we put the hose through here, the trick is to try and block this off as much as possible and then cover that at the same time.
Is that so it shoots it back up that way?
Well, just so you can watch it come through. I'll try to be gentle with this. This is where I really like glasses. But you'll see the carburetor cleaner come through all 3 holes. It just shoots up, shoots up, shoots up. I just drip some down. That right there, and see this opens up everything. Notice on this carburetor we don't have all those freeze plugs. You just instantly open all that up by removing this plate. You block those off, and then you can actually see, if you hold this up, you can see that
right
those,
through it.
you can see all 3 passages are clear. So you can see this one. On the other carburetor, you can't see that because it's got that plug there. So when you take that plug off, it exposes that. That's where you can clean it out. And you don't want to take things and try to poke through or anything.
Right.
Okay? So that would be that side is cleaned up. This side is exactly like this, just different shape. Fuel comes in through here. This is our fuel pump side, so it's coming through here. You can follow the path. Around it goes, comes out through here, comes into this path, this port area, down through the screen, and out through the meter inside.
Yep.
So it's pretty simple. It's just, like I said, they're the same in a way. So once we've got that cleaned, and we can just sit there and the same as the other one, blow it out with a little bit of compressed air, everything's nice and dry, and we can go back together with it. So you remember how it goes back together? And
Are
I
you
do
gonna use
want
the new
to,
gasket?
yeah, we're going to use a different, why don't we just move all this stuff over and we'll just use this kit. We'll just get all that out of here.
Those stay. This stays, right?
Yep, that stays. And I'm going to show you
Spring
something on
stays.
this. Your carburetor kit is actually going to come with 3 different gaskets that have different passages. Okay? That's the passage that we want. Okay? So we set that off to the side. There's our spring. This carburetor kit is a K12WB. We can just dump everything out.
So we don't need this.
Yep, so we can separate out what we need and don't need.
that one.
Nope. And it's this
That one. Match game.
So this one has a smaller, or is that just?
Yeah, no, it's a small screen, and that one's meant to replace the one that's in the plate.
Gotcha.
But that means you have to remove that lock collar. Just clean it.
Yeah.
And then we don't.
We don't need those because this is brand new.
Yeah. Yeah, just set it off to the side. Same with that. Okay.
Okay.
So we can go ahead and start off with the fuel pump side. And it's the same. It's got these alignment dowels. And so the gasket would go first. And we're going to go ahead and install this style of fuel pump diaphragm rather than the rubber one.
Line up the holes.
Yep.
There we go.
Then you can see the shape. Rounded on one side, flat on the other.
It's a little tricky. It's locked in its groove. The holes are all clear.
You're good.
Put the screws back in. Just go down so it's. I'm just going to set them up loosely here quick. And then I'll go and snug them. Okay.
Okay. Now we flip it over and do our fuel metering side. This is the fun one. Okay, so remember we start with that kind of a moon shape coming around. So our gasket is actually going to sit like that. You can see the passages. Does that look right?
No.
Okay.
Yep, that looks better.
There we go. Pretty obvious, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Put these screws in. And remember, just snug. Okay.
May want to snug those down just a little bit more than that. Yeah, that's good. Perfect. Okay,
Alright, that's the fun part.
that's the fun part. So you can start by just putting the spring there because you know the spring's going to have to go there. Because once you're holding all that together in one hand, it's kind of... Spring goes right there. Okay.
Okay.
And you need this guy too.
It goes on that side, right?
Boy, this is not fat finger kind of work. Got it? Oh, remember, put it on the end of your screwdriver. There you go.
I'll turn it so that way he can see. And snug.
Good.
And let go slowly.
Okay.
Alright, so are we checking this again?
Yes.
So this would be a WB.
Yep.
So on the WB, it's right there.
Yep. So you just go straight across like that.
How do you see it, Jeremy?
And that looks really good.
That looks right on.
Okay. Excellent.
All right. Now,
This one gets gasket first, right?
Yep.
Line up the marks.
and
Get
then
in
we have
this
to
one.
remember to get that little sucker in there. You should feel it kind of grab it.
Yeah. So it's kind of easy to tell if it's actually on there or not. You can take the diaphragm itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's hooked.
it's on there. Don't yard on it or anything, but you can just definitely tell it's on there. If it's not on there, most of the time it's caught over the top of it. What do you think's happening?
Well, it's got
It's
more
open all the time.
opening it.
Yeah, you'll no more than go to prime your engine and you'll just notice it's flooded.
Get these ones on. And get them to snug up. Okay.
Perfect. Now we go ahead and start. It's always easiest to go ahead and start with your low side screw first.
Mm-hmm.
So that goes here. And you can see it's marked with an L and an H. So if you do the low side one first, and then you can go to your initial setting of 1 1/8 turn out, and then do your high side. The only reason I say that is because that T handle usually will end up stopping where you need to get the screwdriver in for the other one.
There we go.
Then you can use a screwdriver. Just go all the way until it stops, but don't force it.
Okay.
Okay, now go ahead and open it. One,
One and a- one and a-
1 plus an eighth.
1 plus an eighth.
Yep.
So there's a half. There's 1. Right
And
there.
an eighth. Yep. Good.
Okay.
Now you can go ahead and do the high side.
Little spring, little washer to protect the O-ring. Just like that.
Yep.
And be careful threading it in. And it presses right down inside.
Mhm.
Nice and easy. And go till it stops.
Yep.
Right there.
Yep. And
Go
then
1
1 plus a
and a
quarter.
half. 1
And a quarter.
and a quarter.
And that's it.
That's it.
That's it. That's ready to go on. Now, not everybody's going to have one of these. This is a pop-off pressure tester. Okay? So what it's doing is, all we're really accomplishing with this is to make sure that that metering, fuel metering side actually seats, and how much pressure it takes for it to actually pop off, where it's letting fuel through. So on the WG8s, if you have your carburetor together, you can take the pressure tester, go ahead and put it on to where your fuel line would go, and this is just a little pump. So this is just to release the pressure, and this is to close it. Now what we want to do is we can sit there and we can go like this. Okay, see how the pressure's coming down? Now what we want to see is that it actually seats up and doesn't keep going. And notice how this one keeps going. And going. And still going. So I like to do this a few times because it's new when we put it in. But I'll show you another thing. This is all the pressure that it takes to make this release. That's how sensitive the diaphragm is. Okay, so we'll try this again. This carburetor was actually removed because it's a factory defect.
Oh,
Okay, so I wanted to show the difference between
okay.
what one would look like. Some people think that when they get one of these brand new that it's going to be good. I've got a box of about 80 or 90 of these that failed right from the factory.
Wow.
Okay, and the reason that they fail is you're going to end up with symptoms on your engine like you can't start it or it won't idle, or if you rev the engine up and just let off the gas, it quits, and it's because it's rich. And the reason it's rich is exactly because of this. It's not seating, so fuel's just flowing all the time. Okay, so this is what a bad one looks like. We just put a new kit in this, right? Doesn't make any difference. And it's usually because the seat inside the carburetor is not true to where the taper fit of the needle goes in. I've used a magnifying glass and looked in there, and you can see that it's kind of offset, so it'll never seat. We try to catch this stuff before they go out of here. We can't catch everything. So if that happens to you, we'll get you a new carburetor. But this is what it looks like when they do that. And this will just keep dumping fuel, dumping fuel, dumping fuel, dumping fuel. Okay? So that's what a bad one looks like. And we can come here and it's the same thing. We hook up to where the fuel goes in. Seal it up and pump it up. Normally they should seat up pretty quick. Usually they'll drop about 4 psi, 5 psi, and then just stop. So when you get an engine that's running rich, won't idle, when you make mixture adjustments and it doesn't seem to make any difference, a lot of times it's because this isn't seating properly.
Oops.
Yeah, and we don't have control over that.
Yeah.